Welcome to the AI and Your Homeschool podcast. I'm your host, Nancy Manos, and I'm so glad you're here. Today, we're talking about AI, homeschooling, and how parents can thoughtfully prepare their children for a world of rapidly changing technology with biblical wisdom. It is my joy to welcome my friend Heather Haupt to the podcast. Heather is a homeschool graduate and a homeschool mom of 5 with 3 graduates so far. She's a sought-after speaker who is passionate about encouraging and equipping families to pursue God, to parent intentionally, and to delight in the adventure of learning. Heather is the author of Knights in Training, 10 Principles for Raising Honorable, Courageous, and Compassionate Boys, and The Ultimate Guide to Brain Breaks. She's also the co-author of the Go Together curriculum. So my husband James and I had the privilege of serving with Heather and her husband Rich on the board of directors of Arizona Families for Home Education, which we refer to as AFI. And one of my favorite memories with the Haupt family is the years that we would travel around the state together hosting dessert socials or picnics in celebration of some of AFI's anniversaries. And so we have some great memories together, and I know you're going to enjoy Heather and the conversation that we're having today. So Heather, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, it is such a joy and delight to be here with you. And that when you were mentioning our trips around Arizona, I told my kids today I was going to be on your podcast, and they just have all the warm fuzzies. They're like, with Mrs. Manos? And I'm looking at my adult children going, you can call her Nancy now.
Right. That is a funny quirk. There's so many young adults who are married with their own children even now who still call me Mrs. Manos. And I'm like, you can call me by my first name. That's hilarious. Okay, so before we jump into this conversation about technology and raising kids, tell us a little bit about your homeschool experience, your family's homeschool experience, and a little about yourself.
Yeah. Well, I was homeschooled growing up. I was pulled out halfway through first grade. I was the kid that could not sit still, did not work well and learn well in a traditional environment. So my parents made the radical decision back when it was super weird, to pull me out. And it was supposed to just be for a year to teach me how to read. And they found they enjoyed it, and we just kept going. And so fast forward when I met my husband, I mean, really early in our relationship, I'm like, hey, if we were to get married, if we were to have kids, I want to homeschool. What do you think about that? And I'm sure he's looking at me going, well, that's an odd question. But I had experienced firsthand how homeschooling had given me opportunities I would not have had otherwise. And I was close with my family. And so I knew between those two things that I wanted that for my future family. And fast forward, God gave us 5 children. So we got a bonus blessing back in 2020. We always tell people when everybody else was stuck getting COVID puppies, God gave us a baby to go with our new licensed driver. And I'm a big believer. I was like, wow, if I had known it was this nice, I would have tried to get a licensed driver when I had my first. um, so anyway, so we will be officially homeschooling forever. My older 3 have graduated. I just graduated the last of my boys a couple months ago. And so we are moving into a new season with just the girls. So we have a 14-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old daughter still at home.
Oh, that's amazing. I can't believe she's 6 already. Thank you for sharing that. I always think it's so interesting where people come from. And I see a thread, and we're going to talk about this in a bit, just the movement, the need to move that you had as a child and how that really has framed the way you look at education. So as a mom raising kids from young adults down to age 6, what has surprised you most about technology and the way it has changed parenting from your older kids to your youngest?
Yeah, probably. I think the biggest is just how much we as a culture rely on technology. I spoke and wrote a lot on the importance of limiting screens with young children. And I'm actually still a very firm believer in that. But when my kids were little, it was fairly easy, definitely countercultural to turn off the television. We didn't watch all the shows. We didn't sit and watch movies all the time. I didn't use the TV as my visual babysitter, which is hard. Like when I was in that season, that was hard, and we made sacrifices because, of course, everybody else was like, "Oh, if you need to clean, like put them in front of the television." And I was like, "No, that's not good for kids, and we're not doing it." And it required being creative. But I was largely able to do that. And so what's been interesting moving into the teen years and then now with still having like going through the little phase again with Tirza, who's 6, is I'm just realizing that our culture has really transformed to being very integrated into technology and reliant on technology. For instance, with my boys, like even if I wanted to not have a phone, like for them to have jobs, all of their jobs required apps. And so it's been an interesting thing to walk through, like, oh, I can't just there's just we're having to flex and move and go, well, how are we to live in this current age, knowing what I know about screens and what they do to our brain, and yet seeing how integrated in with technology we are, sort of looking and praying through what does it look like to navigate this with wisdom.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that for your three oldest, especially going into jobs and things? What has that transition been like for them?
I remember when my kids were little, I had a family member who was very concerned that I wasn't putting my kids in front of a computer. And this family member was just like, how are they ever going to learn how to use a computer? And look, there's this software and you can get this special, you can buy this special little chair that goes on top of your lap. So your kids can sit on this chair that's on your lap so they can learn how to use the computer. And I'm looking at at this person going, oh, they can figure it out. Like it's not, I think it's harder for us who are older, um, to learn how to use it. Like I will be the first to admit, and you and I have had lots of conversations on AI. So sometimes I still laugh. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing here because I have been very, very skeptical on AI. But I will be the first to tell you that my boys give me lessons on how to use AI.
I love that.
So did they need me teaching them how to use it? No. Did they need me teaching them, which we're going to get into, how to use it wisely and
Yeah.
how not to use it? And what does it mean to do this with integrity? And what does this mean to do so, to walk so in a way that empowers them instead of shackles them?
Yeah.
And so I've had to work through from worldview level things, from big picture things, but the actual how to use it, they have totally figured out how to do. And I am actually feeling very old and going, oh, I'm going to have to sit and watch tutorials and really think deeply about how to do this. And they just intuitively pick it up. With that being said, I was even talking to we're short a car right now. So I had to drop my 18-year-old off at work. And I was telling him about this. And I was like, okay. And just even realizing that between my 18-year-old and my 20-year-old, the difference with how AI has been utilized in our lives has radically changed just between those 2 years. And that
Wow.
was just 2 grade levels. So yeah, so it's just been interesting to see how rapidly things are changing. But for them, they're really able to roll with the punches. What I think is exciting, and so I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I think no matter how much we know about AI, know how to use it, I still think God has equipped us as parents with wisdom on how to help them navigate it well.
I love that. I want parents to hear what you just said, that you didn't do a lot of screens and you weren't teaching them how to use AI, but they've intuitively figured out how to use the tools that are there for them as they need them. And so I think that takes the pressure off us as parents. We don't need to freak out if our 5-year-old doesn't yet know how to, do whatever. They will learn it when they need it, but we're equipping them, which we're going to get into as far as skills they need so that when they use technology, they're ready and they have that integrity and things. So thank you for sharing that. So as technology and AI become more and more part of everyday life, what principles have guided you in deciding where they fit into your family's approach to homeschooling and education?
Years and years ago, I read an article about the tech giants in Silicon Valley and how they were actually putting all of their kids in screen-free schools. So they're the men that are masterminding and creating all of this tech. And I mean, again, this was like 20 years, 15 years ago, which just seems so archaic compared to where we're at right now. Although they were probably aware and testing all this stuff that we're now dealing with on an everyday basis, but they did not want their kids around this tech. In fact, they were very intentional to put them in schools where there was zero tech. And what they realized and what they knew is that if they wanted their children to be the leaders of the future, they needed to have the creative thinking skills, the problem solving skills, the ability to make deep connections in place before they encountered and worked with technology. So, and I found that so encouraging as a parent who was going this maybe not screen free, but really reduced screen environment where people were just looking at me like I had two heads. And I was like, I am not anti technology. I'm just saying for my kids, it's not yet. And I found great comfort in that because it backed up the research that I had seen. And then seeing that these people that were creating it knew the same thing and were making similar choices for their children, which is very confirming. So, with that in mind, we don't do a lot of technology when they're little. I will be the first to admit it's harder now because I did not have a smartphone when my boys were little. So there was not a little computer walking around with me 24/7. Whereas now, especially with the age gap we have, I'm having to talk to my boys like, no, your sister's not going to watch these endless YouTube reels. No, we're not going to do this. No. Um, and so, and yeah, and she is a whiz at getting in, at navigating all of my pictures and watching the videos we've taken. So they can figure it out. But what we have done is we've had to, I think, probably be more intentional now than we even had to be 5, 10 years ago with having opportunity where we are not accessing our screens because we value and we focus on relationships, curiosity, and creativity. And so when those things are strong, then when you introduce the technology, they're going to be able to work rightly with it without things getting out of whack.
It's hard. You're right. It's become more and more a part of our life, even as the grown-ups. I don't go anywhere without my phone. And thinking about the example I'm sending, even for my grandchildren when they're around, like I have to be intentional. You know what? We're just putting this away now. No one needs to reach me right now. I don't need to check Facebook. I don't need to check email. If someone texts me, it'll show up on my watch and I'll be alerted, but I can be free from my screen to enjoy my kids. But it is such a part of our a day that is different even from 10 years ago, the way that
Yeah.
we as adults use our phones. So I'm glad that you shared that.
Yeah. Well, and as believers, I think also keeping in mind the big picture. Like, why are we homeschooling? And so for my husband and I, we wanted to point our children to Christ. We wanted to plant them deep in Christ. And then we wanted to equip them to do whatever it was that God called them to do to make a difference in their communities and in their future families. And so I think sometimes when we go back to what are we doing? Why are we doing things? It helps us make decisions for our family that might be countercultural.
Yes, it's so true. Know your why, as they say. Um, is that a Simon Sinek book, I believe, in marketing? But it works for every aspect of life, just to remember why we're doing what we're doing,
Mhm.
because it matters. And then we can more wisely address things like technology. I'm so glad you shared that. Okay, so let's get back to talking about movement a little bit, because this is such a core aspect that was woven through your own childhood and then also raising your own kids. And then you did a lot of research when you wrote The Ultimate Guide to Brain Breaks. So talk about what happens in a child's brain and body when movement is part of learning, and then why might that be especially important for kids growing up in the age of AI?
Oh, movement is so essential. As children especially move, they are literally sending the wiring in place, setting it up in their brain. And so, like, the example I always go to is at least when my kids were little, there was still a little bit of it. But the idea that a child needs to crawl before they walk. And the reason for that is as they're crawling, it requires one half the brain to integrate with the other half. And that sets the stage for being able to learn how to read, to be able to learn how to think deeply, to use both hemispheres of your brain. You need strong connections between the two hemispheres. And so movement gets that wiring in place so a child is ready to learn how to read. And so what we're seeing now is just a proliferation of children with learning challenges. And I'll be the first to say it is very complex. So it can't be reduced to you didn't let your kid move enough and therefore they have a learning challenge. We have all kinds of things that we've walked through in our house with some of our kids. What we are seeing is that when you are not getting that movement, you're not getting that wiring. And so a lot of times occupational therapy focuses on things like crawling and skipping and doing simple things that used to be just what yesterday's kids did all the time simply by being booted outdoors. It was interesting. I was teaching Sunday school this last week, and it was our first week of the new year. And I was asking they were like middle elementary school aged kids. My class, it was a this or that question, and it was, do you like to play indoors or do you prefer to play outdoors? And I was the only person that went to the outdoor side of the room. Everybody else went to the other side of the room in the class.
Oh,
And
wow.
then they started sharing with each other about their favorite video games and their favorite apps. And they wanted to be close to their screens. And I was just looking at it going, no, no. Um, because they're missing out on so much simply by just playing outside, doing what kids have done for thousands of years. Actually wires their brain so that they're ready to be deep thinkers. They're ready to make connections. They see cause and effect as they're just outside playing. And so that's where the idea of movement helps get that wiring in place so kids are ready to learn. And then what I write about in the Ultimate Guide to Brain Breaks is that you can utilize movement to help kids refocus. And so the idea of brain breaks, those quick 2 to 3 minute breaks, really helps sort of reset the brain so that it can think creatively and think at a greater capacity. And the more that we are doing sedentary activities at a desk, even reading or working out a math problem on paper. So it's not just screens. It's just our thinking brain has a tendency to go to sleep. And so we need to be waking it up. And I think as adults, we know how to do that. When that happens, we're like, oh, we need a coffee, or oh, I'm going to go to the bathroom, or oh, I'm going to brush my teeth. Like, it's not the end of the world if you wait on those things, but we just intuitively know our body needs to get up and move. And for kids, a lot of times they don't know how to read that. And then we tell them as a culture, like, you need to sit still in order to learn, when actually the opposite in many cases is more true. They need to be moving, involving their bodies with the learning process.
It's amazing. Your book is amazing. I would highly recommend this book. I love that you have both the research, the reasons that movement helps learning, and then also you have like cards that they can cut apart and put in a jar. And, your kids are daydreaming or they're having a hard time focusing, do a brain break. It's such a brilliant thing. And so the book is fantastic, but the idea, the concept of getting up and moving, stretching, doing something different is really helpful. So I think the theme of this, and we're only, 3 questions in, is really how the things that we know about teaching children, the skills that they need to build upon, moving, like from crawling to walking, the things that you've said, we need to not get caught up in how do I teach my child how to use ChatGPT? That really isn't the question at all. It's how do I prepare my child for life, right? And these are
Mhm.
some basic things, but sometimes we get a little worried about the AI factor and we get distracted. And so I'm so excited that we're having this conversation because these foundational things I think are key to preparing your child so that they are ready for the world ahead of them. Okay, so I've been thinking a lot about AI, even for myself, how easy it is to get answers. I turned to it, it started with Siri, and now it's, the Chat GPT app and the talk button. And so it's really easy to get answers to any questions that you have. But you and I we both speak about hands-on learning and cultivating a love of learning, creativity and curiosity are really important. So if AI can answer just about any question, what helps children maintain that sense of wonder and curiosity?
It is discovering things for themselves, figuring it out. My daughter is in a stage where she's like, Mom, I can do this myself. Mom, I know how to do this now. Mom, I can do this. And and it's just there, it gives her such an intense pleasure that she's figured things out for herself. And so there is nothing that can replace discovering something for yourself. And researchers have actually, it's really interesting just to see how technology is rewiring the brain. And a lot of times when we go searching for answers, that answer goes in one ear and out the other, and it doesn't actually integrate in and become a meaningful part of our working memory because we have such easy access. And so there is something to be said about having to use your mental muscles to figure something out. And so I always remind parents, because I teach in my homeschool co-op, several high school classes. I'm doing a middle school class this year too. And I just remind them that this is their training period and that they need to figure it out for themselves. And bypassing that short circuits their development. And so giving them that opportunity to figure it out and then giving them an audience. So being there, like putting our phones down and going, we are going to listen and let
Yeah.
you share what you've discovered.
There is something gratifying about accomplishing something for yourself, right? We gain confidence when we try and fail, when we try again, when we succeed. And what a gift for our kids to give them that experience. And so we don't want to rob them of the lessons that will help them in the future by short circuiting that process. So I'm glad that you shared that.
It's one of my favorite things about homeschooling
Yes.
because we're in more of a one-on-one, one-on-three, one on, even if you have five kids, one-on-five, your kids have the opportunity to figure things out for themselves. I have discovered, I teach high school, college prep biology at my homeschool group. And the years I have a larger class, fewer of them can participate in the conversations. So they can't mentally have to figure it out. Whereas if I had just three or four kids, I could be like, well, what about this? And then they would have to sit and think and reason their way to a correct answer.
Yep.
That takes time. And so that's, I think, one of the coolest. I don't know, there's so many cool benefits to homeschooling, but homeschooling allows your children the opportunity to get to work those mental muscles and then feel the satisfaction of having worked those mental muscles.
Oh, for sure. That's so good. Okay, so one thing I've always appreciated about you and your family is your emphasis on good books. I love that you talk a lot about reading aloud, nature, hands on exploration, things like that. So, why do you think those experiences matter even more in today's world?
I think it matters because I think one of the big questions, and I'm seeing it across the board with both younger and older, and with older, I'm including us as adults in there. But really the question that's coming up in this age of AI is what is real?
Yeah,
What is real? And so it causes people to sort of look and go, is this real or am I getting schnookered or is this fiction? Is this nonfiction? And so when we interact with the real world, when our kids go out and we don't just watch a YouTube video about ants, but we go out and we follow the ants to the ant hill. We have fire ants here in Texas. So it is no joke. You do not totally mess around with it. But I had three boys, so of course they messed around with them a little bit. But we need to have real experiences because real experiences ground them in how things work, and so when they see stuff that maybe is AI generated, they can go, is this even plausible? But if you haven't seen, if you don't understand how the human body works, then you might not understand that the video you're watching is not actually physiologically feasible to happen. This is where you're able to navigate like, oh, that's real, or oh, no, that's not real. But man, it's sort of cool as long as you acknowledge that this is total make believe and not reflective of reality. But if you have not actually had experiences with that, you don't understand the physics of things speeding up and slowing down. You don't understand body mechanics if you're not moving your body. So grounding them in what is real. And then we also need to read real and full books. And so I know when I was homeschooled growing up, the big thing was I remember my mom talking about the importance of reading actual literature instead of reading a chapter or two so that you could understand like these were the themes for this book. And so that's an important distinction. Like we want to read a complete story. And we want to read a complete story, not just so that you actually have the joy of reading a full story, but when you read a full book, you're reading a complete thought. And so, and this is not even just like a, a dog on AI, because I've been Googling things forever. And you get really well versed in reading summaries, in scanning for bullet points. But you don't actually read deeply for full comprehension, for full understanding. And there's something powerful when you read a full book from cover to cover. And I think I don't even know if I quite fully realized it till I wrote my Nights in Training book. And when I came to my last chapter and I'm writing my last chapter, I was just like, oh, I mean, it's just, I felt like there was this big swell of music in the background as I'm writing it, because I'm like, this is my grand conclusion. I'm pulling together every point I've made throughout the book, and it crescendos into this. And I remember after that going, I will never skip the final chapter of a book ever. I mean, unless I'm just totally walking away from it, because that's where the author really pulls everything together and goes, this, this is what I meant.
Oh, that's
Um,
so good.
and and children were reading less and less. I was talking to a friend that started her, she graduated her kids, and so she went back to teaching in the public school, and she goes, they don't use textbooks. They don't use
What?
textbooks. There's not textbooks. They're not reading full books. There's bullet points, and you use computer software to pull together like bullet points, and they don't even read a textbook anymore. There's like bullet points, and you read an outline. And
Oh
it's just,
my.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
And I was just reading an article on research that I think it came out of Cambridge University, where they were looking at the impact of reading full books and reading for pleasure. And they found that like 12 hours a week reading for pleasure was the primo amount of kids just reading for the pure joy of reading, and that was where you reached maximum mental benefits. And I was thinking like how easy it's been to, instead of reading a book to find answers, we go to Google or ChatGPT and they give us a summary, and
Yeah.
we miss all of the ebb and the flow and how we got here and why this matters, and all we're looking at is summary points.
Right.
And I think summary points are really good. I mean, I teach my high school biology class, and well, you know me, Nancy, I love a good PowerPoint presentation. And so
Yep.
I have excellent PowerPoint presentations where I summarize things and I make sure and pull them out. What I also do is I go, hey, turn to page such and such on your book. Do you see where I found this? When it said first this happens, second this happens, and then third, and finally this. Like that's clue for, if you see it first, second, third, that's a great, option for a test question. So as you see those, cue in on that and go, I bet the teacher, wink, wink, is going to utilize that for a test question. If there's a list, like it helps you organize things in your mind. But we have to be reading. When I was talking to my last boy, we were driving somewhere and I was like, okay, what did you like and appreciate most about homeschooling? Because I was really, I guess, feeling lots of all the big feels because it was the last of my boys. And he goes, Mom, what I appreciated most was all the time we spent reading. I read so many books. And I mean, this was the kid who did not make the leap into reading till he was 7.5. I was actually at a convention talking about early childhood development and saying everybody develops at their own timetable. And my almost 7.5-year-old still cannot read. It is painful. Well, I went home from that convention, and within 2 weeks, he went from it was painful to read Bob books to he was reading chapter book after chapter book after chapter book. He hit that developmental growth spurt and then he was off. But with homeschooling, we were able to slow things down and just actually schedule time on the couch reading a book.
What an experience, too, to share rich literature and stories together. I bet you had a lot of great conversations after doing read alouds. I like the things that you shared about that as far as all of the information that you get from a book. It's not just information and facts, is it? There's a story. There's like you said, the ebb and flow. There's so much to reading a book from start to finish, and it's absolutely shocking that kids today are not doing as much of that. I remember my whole childhood growing up. My favorite hour of the week was when it was quiet reading. Get a book, find a corner, and everybody's reading for an hour. And to get to just enjoy a story and to learn something, you open part of your imagination that you wouldn't get from just asking a question of ChatGPT and getting a list of answers, right?
Yeah. But you have to prioritize it now because I don't know. I mean, we'll see going into these elementary years with my youngest, but for the teenagers, once they were in high school and they did have phones, like just the draw to your phone, the draw to the computer, we actually had to intentionally schedule reading time or it wasn't happening even in a home that had valued books.
Sure. Yeah, it's all about being intentional with the things that matter most. We're always, even when we have a great plan and we have a great core value system, we're always going to be drawn to things that are addictive, that have that dopamine hit, that are easy. And sometimes it's the struggle and the challenge that really bears the most fruit. And so I love that you're being intentional, even in a season where it's not as easy to get, you're not immediately drawn to, hey, it's read aloud time. You have to plan it in a little more. That's good for us as moms, I think, to be thinking about what are the most important things and what are the things that are going to bear the most fruit. Don't let them be a fill in later if you have time, right?
Yeah, you'll never have time. Not
No,
not when our screens are there.
no, no. Well, and our lives are full and we're
And our
blessed to
lives are
get to do
full.
lots of things, but we do have to kind of sort through what's most important. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit. Have you used AI? And then where has it been genuinely helpful to you as a homeschool mom in your life, that kind of thing?
Well, I will say I intentionally used AI for the first time after hearing you go on and on about it. And this was after I had walked through the first year of teaching my high school biology class. And I had encountered so many times where people were using AI to cheat that I was like, I was on a mission to make sure that parents told their kids to not use this. And then there you were, like talking about all of its benefits. And I'm going, okay, I have so much respect for you. There's things here that are good. And so actually I started listening to conversations you were having, things other people were saying. And that summer I needed to sign my daughter up for swim lessons and it filled too quickly to get her in the beginner class. And I was like, well, this is the year we got to learn how to swim. And so I signed her up for the next level. And I was like, okay, well, apparently AI can give me lesson plans. And so I went to, I think, ChatGPT probably. And I just said, hey, I need beginner lesson plans like I'm the YMCA. And then it spit out in 3 to 5 minute segments in this beautiful little chart. I mean, it was a table, everything that organizational me, scientist me really likes. It gave me a table with like 3 minutes, do this, 5 minutes, do this. And I have attended enough swim lessons with my other four children where I'm looking, going, oh, they totally gave me the YMCA plan for teaching kids how to swim. And so I put that in a little page protector, went down to the pool, and I got my daughter to the point where she was ready for the next level of swim lessons. And that's where I was like, okay, Nancy, there is something here. And so I have tiptoed more into it and used it more and more. In
Yeah,
fact, my daughter and I are doing Spanish with a friend, high school Spanish with a friend and her two sons. And this friend is really been putting a lot of time and research into how to use AI and how to use it to benefit in her homeschooling. And she's been amazing with teaching Spanish. And so I'm very grateful that we get to just join in and Brett and I get to learn it with them, right? I guess I get reacquainted because I know Spanish. But she showed us this last week. She goes, okay, I've been playing around with AI because what I want is I want to figure out how to harness this for this next year so that her boys, because she still has four kids at home. And so she goes, I need the two boys to be able to interact speaking Spanish. And so I think this could be a way that AI could be really powerful. And so she took a picture of the 94 verbs that we have learned so far from her board and then went to ChatGPT on her phone. That's what I'm like, oh, there's a phone app. Oh, you can just talk to it. I didn't know that. And anyway, we sat there and she was like, make me a couple review games that work with these verbs. We only want this tense, and this tense. So we've learned three verb tenses so far. And then it was amazing. Like it gave a verb, the tense you want, and then the pronouns you needed to use. And so each of the kids took turns like conjugating that verb. And then it gave the question, well, donde está? Where did this happen? Or who did this? And so it asked in Spanish, like expander questions where they had to take their little sentence and expand it and then expand it and then expand it some more. And they got immediate feedback on was their sentence correctly formulated.
That's so cool.
And I'm looking going, that's pretty amazing. And then, and actually, I think this is really cool that this also happened. She goes, and then you can also like tell it like, hey, we're going to read Mark 4 in the NIV. So we got these Bibles that where it's NIV on one side and then it's the NIV Spanish translation on the other because it doesn't use
Oh,
all the
cool.
complicated verbs.
Yeah.
And she goes, listen to me read Mark 4 from the whatever the Spanish NIV translation is and correct me for mispronunciations.
Oh,
And so we did, and some of it actually it missed things. Where I'm like, oh, they didn't pronounce that right. And then there was one or two times where they said something and then it gave like a nonsense word.
oh no.
And I'm trying to think if I think I was confused. The kids were just like, oh, and they were trying to duplicate what chat was telling them to do, but it had nothing to do with what they were reading on their page. And that's where she goes, oh, well, this is not a perfect system because she had to correct chat and tell chat, no, that's not the right word. And so it's actually a good lesson for you have to be careful. And that's where
Yeah.
it's this interesting conundrum of if you know things, which is a message I have told my kids on repeat, and she has too. Like, if you know about things, then you can use this as a tool. But if you don't know, then you don't even know what you don't know. And so you're not able to recognize if there's mistakes or if it's giving you just not what you were looking for, which is what I encountered with my biology class is I had a student trying to use AI to write his lab reports. And we spent the first half of the year going, can he not follow directions? I don't understand why this is so complicated. He seems like a smart kid. And so we would just go back and like walk him through, like, here's how to write a lab report. Here's how to write a hypothesis. Here's how to determine what the point of this lab is. You look at the last paragraph before the lab in the textbook and you read the paragraph after, and that gives you everything you need to know. And then he kept missing the point until she actually thought somebody else was using AI to write their lab report. And that's when I fed his in. I was like, oh, yeah, AI does not know how to write the lab report the way I want it written.
Yeah. Oh, that's
And
so funny. So the
but he
student
didn't
didn't,
know.
yeah,
He thought it looked amazing. And I was looking at it going, I see three arms. What is wrong here? Why can't you read and follow directions?
right. Well, so the student bypassed that bit of learning, and ChatGPT didn't get to hear the benefit of what you were giving as direction.
Right.
Oh my gosh, that is crazy. That is one of the things that I think is so fascinating about the world that we live in today, whether it's homeschooling, public school, college, the use of AI, and trying to detect the use of AI. I love the whole thing about the M dash is a giveaway that it was AI. Well, yes, both ChatGPT and Claude, they all use the M dash, but I've always used the M dash. And so
Right.
something that I've used in real writing is now like a tip off, like this must be AI generated. And so like, I know I didn't have this question for you in advance, but is that something that you're encountering or even preparing your kids for as far as, if any of them are doing higher education or your kids that are still being homeschooled?
Yeah.
If you use AI, you have to disclose it, right? First, you should get permission and disclose it. But doing a co-op, like, are you looking for things? Are you trying to assess, was this written by the student or was this written by AI? And then how do you help them kind of navigate,
Yeah,
okay, here's a good use of AI and here's a use of AI that probably short-circuited the whole learning process.
right. Yeah, it's interesting. I have a strict no AI policy in my class. But I had to sort of navigate it a little differently this last year. I had a student who had a lot of learning challenges, a lot. I recognized some that I think one of my kids has. And so I had so much compassion for her because she is having to get very creative in figuring out how she's going to learn the material. I wish she hadn't asked me in front of the whole class, but she asked me towards the end, like, "Hey, I've been using AI to help me study for the tests." And that's where I was like, well, I would be very careful because our textbook is written from a biblical worldview. So what is out there on the internet is not going to match what I am looking for necessarily. And so I would just be very careful with that. And that's when she was like, "Oh, I'm taking pictures of the textbook and asking." And I was like, again, this is where I'm like, I didn't even know that was a possibility.
Yeah,
So I think as a teacher, I'm struggling with, I've really got to wrap my head around this. So yeah, so I wouldn't sit there and recommend for my entire class to do it because I think there's a lot of dangers and pitfalls. And I actually don't think you should have it take pictures of your textbook and have it summarize it for you for the points that I've made earlier. But for this particular student, she was getting very creative and working very hard to figure out how she was going to make this work for herself. And she was
sure.
such a delight, had such a curiosity that she genuinely had some pretty profound learning challenges. And she worked through it. And so I think there's some give and take there, but it's just, it's an interesting thing of not bypassing the thinking process,
Right.
which is where my one student who had done it the year before, um, was a smart cookie. He just didn't want to put in the work. And he
Yeah.
thought this was going to be a way to have less work for himself. And that's where I think having these conversations with our students going, the point of school is not to check a box.
Right.
The point of an education is to develop your mind and your ability to think and to give yourself this huge foundation of knowledge
Yeah.
that then when you go and start using AI, you can like manipulate it like Tony Stark and move things all around and do all of the cool things. But if you don't have that foundation of knowledge, and if you don't have the ability to critically think, you can't do it. And you think it looks amazing. And those of us that know what we're talking about are looking, going, why are there three arms? Why are there three
Right.
arms on this image? This is so fake. This is so obviously not real.
Right.
Um,
It's so important, just the work of learning. I love that you shared that. So, what are your teens and young adults saying? I have been hearing from moms of young adults. I talked to Dr. Melanie Wilson, and she was saying that all of her grown children are like, we don't want anything to do with AI. Are you encountering some interesting conversations, I guess, with teens in your co-op or young adults about, the ethics of it or their interest in it? Are anybody kind of digging in one way or the other?
um, I would say it's varied. Like my friend, the two boys I was talking to have no interest in using AI. And I think some of it is like they know enough to know that if they use it wrong, they're going to look really dumb. And actually, I think with that, like their mom has such a like, let's figure this out mentality. Like she's inspired me in a way similar to you to go, okay, it's a tool, it's here. Like, why am I okay with Googling things, but I'm not okay with never using AI? Well, actually, now that I try to Google things, they just automatically do AI anyway. So all of this, my high horse, like I Google things, I don't use AI, is sort of going out the window. So there's a little bit of that. And this is where I think we just need to be having ethical questions with our talking with our kids, because the world is not going to. And that is like, what does it mean to live with integrity? What does it mean to pass things off as your own? It's been interesting. I've had a couple people, Facebook acquaintances, who like out of nowhere are just like, I published a book. And I'll admit, like, I look at them and I'm like, you don't blog, you don't write anywhere, and now you just like suddenly have this big book. I'm sorry, I've written short form books, I've written long form books, I've written blog articles. Writing takes a lot of time. It is it is not, and so I immediately in my mind go to, oh, I bet they had AI write them something and they're passing it off as their own work. Um, and that's sad. So I think talking to our kids about, hey, we need to do things with integrity. And so you need to look and go, what are the parameters for this assignment? And if that is allowable, then go for it. But if it's not, and so we've had situations, I mean, these are kids that say they love Jesus, they'll have Bible verses in their bios, and then they're bragging to their friends about using AI to write their papers and how they snookered the teacher. And it's like, I don't know, I think we have some cultural temptations where there's sort of like, you're cool if you're the bad boy. As long as it doesn't hurt anybody, it's okay. And then sort of the, if I can get away with it, then who's to know?
Right.
And but it's so much so, like, it's just mind-boggling that these kids are cheating and then bragging to their other Christian homeschool friends that they're cheating.
Yeah. There's a bit of a
And
disconnect between what you say you believe and your actions, which really that's the core of integrity, right? And ethics. We
right.
want to teach our kids. So those are probably good teachable moments. It's funny that you
Yes.
said that about, I think there is a suspiciousness, skepticism about things that are written now. And it's so funny because I was working on, someone had submitted an article and I thought that the opening needed a change to fit the purpose that it was going to be used for. And I sent back my recommendation, and it was someone who was in a mastermind group with me about AI. And she's like, did AI write this? And I said, no, I actually wrote it myself. But it's so funny because I'm such an
Mhm.
advocate for this is a tool that can help you, that her first thought was, you used AI, didn't you? And I actually did the work myself, but I could have very easily just fed the article
Yeah,
into Claude or ChatGPT and said, hey, this needs a different opening. Can you help me? And so even for adults, but I think there's something really intriguing about this healthy skepticism. You know, is it real? Was this, did you do the work? Or is this something that came from a machine, from an algorithm versus the
yeah,
human experience? It's so
right.
interesting.
Well, and that's where with my boys, I worked with them on, hey, do everything in Microsoft Word or some place where you can track your drafts. Because if people can see the process of developing this,
Yes.
that's like when I've encountered families who have had allegations of this was AI written because nobody knows how to write anymore. And you're like, well, actually, some of the homeschoolers do know how to write. Um, and so having that where you can look back and go, here's my drafts. I actually did develop this. And so I think one of the big things that I talk to my kids about on repeat is I said, don't let anyone or anything do your thinking for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if you are, and this is just, I mean, in this age of reels and things, it's just you get like little snippets of information. And even with the reels, I've had to have conversations with my kids. I'm like, I mean, were these reels, I don't know how much of them are AI generated or how much of them are people hear stuff often enough that they go and repeat it,
Right.
and it's just not true, but they've heard it enough that they think it must be true. So I go back to COVID. I'm like, hey, there was a lot of things that were being said. And just because it's said on repeat doesn't mean it's actually real or it's actually true or it's grounded in any kind of fact. And so just having that healthy skepticism and going, is this real? Where did you get this information is important. And I've seen that directing my boys as they're doing searches like, oh, okay, I'm seeing this. Where's the source? And they will click through to the source.
That's the thing that I hear you say over and over is about conversation, talking with your kids, and having those important conversations around critical thinking, integrity, the actual doing the work. Don't short circuit the process. Those are such key takeaways that as parents, it's the most important job that we have beyond introducing them to and discipling them. They need to know and love the Lord, and they need to grow in their walk with God. Beyond that, there's such important foundational things that we need to be teaching our kids, and it really is heart issues, core
Yep.
values, walking out what the Bible says, having integrity and looking like Jesus really is what it all comes down to. And so I love that you have these important conversations, and not just with your own kids, with the kids in your co-op, I'm sure, are impacted by just even the way you present a lesson. So they're also important. As you're thinking about the kids we're raising for this world, this AI-driven world, this digital age, what gives you the most hope? And I would say, especially as it relates to homeschooling, because as you and I both talk about a lot, I think we have a unique opportunity as homeschoolers. So what gives you hope in this wild world that we live in?
Well, I think we are nothing, no matter what kind of technology opportunities we have, nothing changes who we are as human beings. And we are hardwired for relationship, and we're hardwired to create. We're created in the image of a creator God, and and to think. Like those are things that make us human. And so I think as we go increasingly into this AI age, there is going to be this hunger and thirst for what is real and wanting real relationships. I think people might have to go into the I have my virtual friends and then realize like this is not real. This is not satisfying. And so I think what gives me hope is that we have an opportunity to ground our children and to
Yeah,
help them learn how to live out relationally with one another. We have the opportunity to give them time to read real books, to explore the real world. And then, especially as they get older, connecting like why that matters is going to position them to offer hope to other people as they move out into adulthood and go, no, there's actually a better way. I don't blame you for feeling this way. And that's just, you just need real in-person connections with people. And you need,
yeah.
I would just unplug for a little bit and read a real book. I recommend this one. And so we have an opportunity to raise people who have these skills that they can then bless those around them with.
Right. Oh, that's so encouraging. Okay, so as we wrap up, for the homeschool mom who maybe is feeling like she's fighting screens in her home, do you have some encouragement or maybe a practical tip that she could apply this week that might move them back towards relational book reading, engaging in nature, like those kind of things?
Schedule it. Schedule it. Go, what am I missing? What do I feel like I'm missing most? So if it's, I miss, our family needs to get outside more, schedule it. Make it a priority. Put it on your to-do list. And then leave the screens. So so that works with getting outside. We have had to do that with reading. So we have gone through periods where we have declared like a certain night of the week totally screen free. And what I usually try to do is I have some kind of yummy snack and everybody gets their favorite book and you just read and we all read in the same room. And what inevitably happens when you're reading is you reach a funny part and you snicker and someone's like, what's so funny? And then you get to share about it. And so what I did to try to lessen the pain point, because man, if you're really wanting those screens, is my husband and I, when we did it in the evening, both committed to we can live one night without our phones, and we're just not going to look at our phone until the morning. And so we put them away. And so this was what we did with teenagers. Everybody put their phone away, and you weren't to look at it until the next morning. And so we read, we talked, and then we went to bed like old-fashioned people. Um, but we had to schedule that. There was no amount, no matter how much I believed that we should be doing that, it wasn't the reality in my house. So we scheduled it. Last summer, I also realized my kids were not reaching for books and lounging on the couch and
Mm.
reading. So I declared an hour of just read. And I mean, I had specific goals. I didn't want them to read their favorite fantasy fiction over again. So I was like, it has to be historical fiction or a biography. Or my son asked to read a philosophy book. I'm like, okay, that counts. Because no more sci-fi, you know? And
Right.
nobody balked. Nobody balked because we had done that when they were little, but I had to schedule it or it wouldn't happen. So my biggest tip is what do you feel like you're missing and put it into your schedule and put it in a little bite-sized chunk. Because if you make it too big of a deal, like we're going to read for 6 hours, 2 hours every day, is that realistic? So
Yeah.
make it a realistic bite-sized chunk and then go from there.
That is a phenomenal tip that I can apply to my own life. I love that. I hope that it is encouraging to parents who are listening. And there has been so many great tips and thoughts in this conversation. And I'm so grateful that you've taken the time today. And I really hope that this is an encouragement to the moms and dads that listen. I know that they're going to come away encouraged and hopefully better equipped for these really important things. The bottom line, I think, of every conversation I'm having on this podcast is that it really has little to do with technology, the things that we're preparing our kids for. I think it's so important what we're preparing our kids with is character, it's relationship, it's communication, it's study skills, it's engaging with the real world over preparing them for technology. They don't need a class in ChatGPT. They need these other things. And so I just appreciate everything that you've shared. Where can people find you?
So our website is cultivatedlearning.org, or I have a lot of older information. All my raising boys stuff is over at heatherhaupt.com. And then I'm hoping now that I've graduated my last boy, to pick up and to become a little more active once again on Facebook or Instagram. So you can find me there at Cultivated Learning or Heather Haupt.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Heather, for joining me today. And thank you, everyone, for listening to the AI and Your Homeschool podcast. I invite you to subscribe. And if this episode was helpful to you, please share it with a friend. And I'll see you next time.